I was standing on the dock at Charleston Marina, South Carolina, staring at the empty space where my boat should have been, when I realized the HOA had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. My name is Samuel Xavier, and I had lived in Palmetto Harbor for 8 years. The gated waterfront community was one of those places where retirees with too much time and homeowners with inflated egos gathered to play neighborhood politics. I kept to myself mostly, ran my marine supply business, and enjoyed my weekends on the water. Or at least, I used to enjoy them until this particular Saturday morning in April 2026. "Excuse me, you cannot be here." The voice came from behind me, sharp and nasal. I turned to see a woman in her late 40s marching down the dock, her highlighted blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. She wore white capri pants and a pink polo shirt with the HOA logo embroidered on it. A clipboard was clutched in her manicured hands like a weapon. "I am here because this is my boat slip," I said, keeping my voice level. "Has been for 8 years. Slip number 42. "Not anymore." She planted herself in front of me, radiating that particular brand of self-righteousness only HOA board members seem to master. "I am Patricia Montgomery, president of the Palmetto Harbor Homeowners Association. This slip has been reassigned." I felt my jaw tighten. "Reassigned? I pay my slip fees every year." "What are you talking about?" Patricia consulted her clipboard with exaggerated importance. "According to our records, you missed the March payment deadline. Per HOA bylaws section 12.7, failure to pay slip fees by the 15th of each month results in forfeiture of your assigned slip. The board voted yesterday to reassign this premium location." "I paid on March 10th, I said, pulling out my phone. "I have the confirmation email right here." She did not even glance at my screen. "Our records show no such payment. Perhaps you should have paid more attention to your financial obligations, Mr. Xavier. Now, this slip has been assigned to someone else, and you are trespassing on HOA-managed property. I suggest you leave before I call security." "Where is my boat?" The question came out cold and hard. "Your vessel has been relocated to slip 98. She pointed toward the far end of the marina, where the older, smaller slip sat exposed to the wind and waves. "You should be grateful we did not have it removed from the property entirely." I looked back at slip 42, one of the prime locations with deep water access, protection from storms, and easy access to the channel. Then I noticed the gleaming 60-foot yacht now occupying my spot. It was new money, the kind of boat people bought to show off rather than actually use. "Who did you give my slip to?" I asked. Patricia's expression shifted to something smug. "That is confidential HOA business. Now please leave, or I will be forced to call the police for trespassing." I stood there for a long moment, weighing my options. This was not worth getting arrested over, not yet anyway. I turned and walked back down the dock, feeling Patricia's satisfied gaze burning into my back. But I was not leaving, not by a long shot. My boat, a 32-foot fishing vessel named Second Chance, sat in the cramped space of slip 98 like a thoroughbred stuck in a chicken coop. The slip was barely adequate for my boat's size, and the pilings were weathered and unreliable. I climbed aboard, my mind racing through what had just happened. The HOA had always been aggressive, but this was different. This was targeted. In 8 years, I had never missed a payment, never violated a rule, never given them cause to harass me. I pulled up my banking records on my phone and confirmed what I already knew. The payment had been processed on March 10th, exactly where it should be. I called my bank first. The representative confirmed that the electronic payment to Palmetto Harbor, HOA, had been completed successfully on March 10th for the full amount of $450. I asked them to email me an official statement showing the transaction, which they did within minutes. Next, I went through my files. Every receipt, every email confirmation, every piece of documentation related to my slip rental was organized and backed up. I had learned years ago to keep meticulous records when dealing with bureaucracies, and HOAs were some of the worst bureaucracies in existence. Armed with proof, I headed to the HOA office. The building sat near the community entrance, a whitewashed structure that tried too hard to look like a southern plantation. Inside, the receptionist looked up from her computer with a practiced smile. "I need to speak with Patricia Montgomery," I said. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I need to clear up a payment issue." The receptionist's smile became more plastic. Mr. Xavier, correct? Mrs. Montgomery anticipated you might stop by. She said to inform you that all decisions made by the board are final and not subject to appeal by individual homeowners. If you wish to dispute the slip reassignment, you may submit a written complaint to be reviewed at next month's board meeting. Next month, my boat is sitting in an inadequate slip right now. I have proof I paid on time. That is between you and the board, sir. Now, if you will excuse me, I have other duties to attend to. She turned back to her computer, dismissing me entirely. I stood there, frustration building in my chest. This was classic HOA behavior. Arbitrary decisions, no accountability, and layers of bureaucracy designed to wear people down until they gave up. But they had picked the wrong person to mess with. I left the office and drove home, a 3-bedroom house I had bought when I moved to Charleston. It was not in Palmetto Harbor itself, which meant I was not technically a homeowner in the community, just a boat slip renter. That distinction was important, and it was about to become very important. My home office was cluttered with paperwork related to my business, but buried in the filing cabinet was a folder I had not opened in years. The label read, Property Deeds and Legal Documents. I pulled it out and spread the contents across my desk. 20 years ago, my grandfather had died and left me his estate. At the time, I was in my late 20s, working odd jobs and trying to figure out my life. Most of the inheritance was land, pieces of waterfront property scattered along the South Carolina coast that my grandfather had accumulated over decades of shrewd investing. I had sold some of it to start my business, but I had held onto other parcels without really thinking about them. One of those parcels was in Charleston, a strip of waterfront property that, according to the deed, ran for nearly half a mile along the harbor. I had never paid much attention to it because it had always generated rental income through some management company, and the checks were deposited automatically into my account. The amounts were not huge, just a few $1,000s a month, enough that I noticed them, but not enough to really focus on where they came from. Now, looking at the property description and comparing it to a map of the area, I felt something click into place. I pulled up satellite imagery on my computer and traced the boundaries described in the deed. Then I looked up the address for Palmetto Harbor Marina. They were the same location. I sat back in my chair, barely believing what I was seeing. The entire Palmetto Harbor Marina, with its 200 boat slips, its fancy yacht club, and its self-important HOA, sat on land that I owned. Not the HOA, not some development company. Me. I dug deeper into the paperwork. There was a lease agreement, dated 15 years ago, between my grandfather and Palmetto Harbor Development Corporation. The lease was for 99 years, with annual payments of $36,000. The lease had transferred to me upon my grandfather's death, and I had been receiving those payments ever since without really understanding what they were for. The management company that handled the property had simply listed it as Charleston Harbor Lease on my statements. According to the lease terms, the lessee was required to maintain the property, pay all taxes and fees, and could develop the land for marina and residential purposes. But there were clauses, lots of them, including provisions about subleasing, property management, and dispute resolution. I started reading carefully, and what I found made me smile for the first time since that morning. The lease contained a standard clause that the lessee could not interfere with the lessor's property rights or access to the leased premises. It also stated that any subleases or slip rentals were subject to the lessor's approval, though that approval could not be unreasonably withheld. More importantly, there was a section about breach of contract. If the lessee violated the terms of the lease, particularly in ways that harmed the lessor's interests or rights, the lessor could demand immediate remediation or, in extreme cases, terminate the lease with 30 days' notice. I was the lessor. Palmetto Harbor Development Corporation was the lessee, and the HOA, as the management entity for the marina, had just violated my property rights by seizing my boat slip without cause. Monday morning, I called the management company that handled my properties. The woman who answered was polite, but clearly had no idea about the specifics of any individual property. "I need detailed information about the Charleston Harbor lease," I said. "All documents, all correspondence, everything related to that property." "Of course, Mr. Xavier. May I ask what this is regarding? I am having a dispute with the lessee, and I need to understand my rights under the lease agreement. Her tone became more cautious. I see. We can compile that information for you. It may take a few days. I need it today. This is urgent. There was a pause. Let me speak with my supervisor. Can I call you back within the hour? Make it 30 minutes. 20 minutes later, my email started filling with documents. Copies of the original lease, amendment agreements, payment histories, tax records, and correspondence between my grandfather and Palmetto Harbor Development Corporation. I spent the rest of the morning reading through everything, making notes, and building my case. The picture that emerged was fascinating. My grandfather had been a tough negotiator. The lease was heavily weighted in his favor, with strict requirements on the leasee and multiple avenues for enforcement. He had also insisted on a personal right to maintain a boat slip at the marina at no cost beyond standard maintenance fees, a right that had transferred to me as his heir. That last part was crucial. I had a contractual right, separate from my rental agreement with the HOA, to keep a boat at the marina. The HOA's actions did not just violate their own payment records. They violated the underlying lease agreement that gave them the right to operate the marina in the first place. I called a lawyer next, a real estate attorney named Jennifer Walsh, who I had worked with on business contracts. I explained the situation and sent her all the documents. "This is incredible," she said after reviewing the materials. "You own the land under one of the most expensive marinas in Charleston, and you did not even know it?" I knew I owned property. I did not realize it was this property. "Can we do anything about what the HOA did?" "Can we do anything? Samuel, you can do just about anything you want. This lease agreement gives you substantial rights. The HOA is technically a sub-agent of the Development Corporation, which means they are bound by the lease terms. If they violated your rights as the lessor, you have grounds to demand remediation, compensation, or even terminate the lease." Terminate the lease, what would that mean? It means you could evict every boat in that marina and shut the whole thing down if you wanted to. Though I would not recommend that as a first step. Let me draft a letter to the HOA and the Development Corporation outlining the situation and demanding immediate remediation. We will start there and see how they respond. How long will that take? I can have something ready by tomorrow. But Samuel, you need to prepare for this to get ugly. HOAs do not like being challenged, and when they realize you own the land they are sitting on, they are going to panic. "Good," I said. "Let them panic." Tuesday afternoon, I was back at the marina when I saw him. A young man in his 20s, tall and athletic with that prep school confidence that comes from never being told no. He was walking toward the 60-foot yacht in Slip 42, my former slip, with a woman who looked like she spent more on her gym membership than most people spent on rent. "Nice boat," I called out as he stepped onto the dock. He turned and gave me a casual wave. "Thanks, man. Just picked her up last week." "You slip is 42? "Yeah, the HOA hooked me up with a premium spot. My dad knows people." He said it casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world to have connections smooth your way. "Your dad knows people in the HOA? "My dad is Vice President Douglas Carmichael. He made some calls, pulled some strings, and here I am." He grinned, clearly proud of the connection. "Sometimes it pays to have family in high places." I felt pieces clicking into place. Vice President Douglas Carmichael had a vacation home somewhere in the Charleston area. I had seen it in the news a few months ago, and now his son was occupying my boat slip because Patricia Montgomery and her HOA board wanted to curry favor with political power. "Well, enjoy it while it lasts," I said, keeping my tone neutral. He laughed. "I plan to, man. I plan to." I walked away, my mind working through the implications. This was not just HOA pettiness. This was corruption, plain and simple. They had seized my property to give preferential treatment to someone with political connections. That made everything that was about to happen much easier to justify. Wednesday morning, Jennifer called. "The letter is ready. I am sending it via certified mail and email to both the HOA and Palmetto Harbor Development Corporation. I'm also sending a courtesy copy to the corporate offices of their insurance carrier, just to make sure everyone understands how serious this is." "What did you include?" Everything. Proof of your ownership of the land, proof that the HOA violated the lease terms, proof that they falsely claimed non-payment on your part, and a demand for immediate remediation. Specifically, we are demanding that your boat be returned to slip 42 within 72 hours, that you receive a written apology, and that the HOA pay damages for the violation of your property rights under the lease. I put the damages at $10,000, which is reasonable given the circumstances. What if they refuse? Then we file suit, and we include a notice of lease termination. That will get their attention very quickly. Do it. The response came faster than I expected. Thursday morning, my phone rang from an unknown number. Mr. Xavier? This is Richard Thornton. I am the attorney for Palmetto Harbor Development Corporation. I received your lawyer's letter, and I need to speak with you urgently. I'm listening. There seems to be a misunderstanding about the situation with your boat slip. The HOA acted in good faith based on their payment records. I am sure we can resolve this amicably. Good faith? They gave my slip to Vice President Carmichael's son as a political favor. That is not good faith. That is corruption. There was a pause. I am not aware of any political considerations in the slip assignment. However, I would like to propose a meeting to discuss this matter. Can you come to my office tomorrow afternoon? Sure, but my lawyer will be there too. Of course. 2 o'clock? I will see you then. Jennifer and I arrived at Richard Thornton's office in downtown Charleston at exactly 2 o'clock on Friday. The office was all dark wood and leather furniture, designed to intimidate. Thornton was in his 50s, with gray hair and expensive suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Patricia Montgomery was already there, looking significantly less confident than she had on the dock. Next to her was another man I did not recognize, probably from the Development Corporation. Thank you for coming, Thornton said, gesturing to chairs across from his desk. I am hoping we can resolve this situation without further escalation. That depends on what you are offering, Jennifer said, her tone professional but cold. First, let me acknowledge that there was an administrative error regarding Mr. Xavier's payment. Our accounting department has confirmed that his March payment was received and processed on time. The HOA will be correcting their records immediately. Patricia looked like she had swallowed something bitter, but she nodded stiffly. Second, Thornton continued, we are prepared to offer Mr. Xavier a full refund of his slip fees for the current year, along with a written apology for the inconvenience. And my boat slip? I asked. We would like to discuss that. Slip 42 is currently occupied by another tenant who entered into a good faith agreement with the HOA. We cannot simply break that agreement without cause. However, we are prepared to offer Mr. Xavier slip 37, which is equivalent in size and quality to 42, at no charge for the remainder of the year. No, I said flatly. I want my slip back. Slip 42. Patricia finally spoke up, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. That is not reasonable, Mr. Xavier. We have another tenant in that slip now, a tenant with significant connections who specifically requested that location. We cannot simply uproot him because you are throwing a tantrum. A tantrum, I leaned forward. You stole my property to give it to someone because his daddy is vice president. That is not me throwing a tantrum. That is you committing fraud and corruption. Now wait just a minute, Thornton interjected. There is no evidence of corruption here. The slip was reassigned based on what the HOA believed at the time to be valid grounds. Jennifer pulled out a folder and laid several documents on the desk. These are emails between Mrs. Montgomery and other HOA board members obtained through a public records request since the HOA is operating on leased public trust property. In these emails, dated 2 weeks before Mr. Xavier's slip was seized, board members discuss moving him to a less desirable location to make room for a VIP tenant. They specifically mention Vice President Carmichael's son and the political benefits of accommodating him. The room went silent. Patricia's face had gone pale. Thornton picked up the emails and read through them, his expression darkening. Where did you get these? He asked quietly. Public records request, as I said. The marina operates under a lease that includes state-owned waterways, which makes certain HOA communications subject to sunshine laws. These emails were on the HOA's server, and they clearly show premeditation to seize Mr. Xavier's property for political reasons. Thornton set the emails down carefully. I need to consult with my clients. Can we take a 15-minute recess? Take your time, Jennifer said. They left the conference room, and I could hear raised voices from down the hall. Patricia's voice rose above the others at one point, shrill and defensive. When they returned, Thornton looked like a man who had just received bad news. We are prepared to return slip 42 to Mr. Xavier, he said. The other tenant will be relocated to slip 37. Additionally, we will provide a written apology and compensation in the amount of $5,000 for the inconvenience and distress caused by this situation. $10,000, Jennifer said, as stated in our letter, plus a formal acknowledgement that the slip seizure was improper and politically motivated. We cannot admit to political motivation, Thornton said quickly. That creates liability issues. Then we will see you in court, Jennifer said, standing up, and we will also be filing a notice of lease termination. Mr. Xavier has grounds under the lease agreement to revoke Palmetto Harbor Development Corporation's access to his property due to material breach of contract. That means every boat in this marina will need to find a new home within 30 days. Thornton held up his hands. Please sit down. Let us talk about this. We sat. Thornton looked at Patricia, then at the other man from the Development Corporation, then back at us. $10,000, he said. Written apology. Slip 42 returned to Mr. Xavier within 48 hours, but no admission of political motivation in any written documents. We will acknowledge the slip seizure was based on erroneous payment records and should not have occurred. Jennifer looked at me. I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. Not enough, I said. I want Patricia Montgomery removed as HOA president, effective immediately. She abused her position for political gain, and I will not accept any settlement that leaves her in power. Patricia exploded. You cannot demand that. I am elected by the homeowners. You are elected by homeowners who live on my land, I shot back. Land that I can reclaim if I choose. Jennifer, show them the lease termination notice. Jennifer pulled out another document and slid it across the table. This is a formal notice of lease termination, dated today. It cites multiple breaches of the lease agreement, including interference with the lessor's property rights, failure to obtain approval for subleases as required, and material misrepresentation of payment records. Under the lease terms, Palmetto Harbor Development Corporation has 30 days to vacate the premises and remove all structures and vessels. If we file this notice with the county clerk's office, it becomes legally binding. The man from the Development Corporation, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. If you terminate the lease, you destroy a marina that serves 200 boat owners. People have invested millions of dollars in vessels that are docked here. The economic impact alone would be devastating, not to mention the lawsuits we would face from slip renters. Then I suggest you take my demands seriously, I said. Patricia Montgomery resigns or the lease terminates. Your choice. Thornton looked at Patricia. I need to speak with my clients privately. Please give us a few minutes. This time, they were gone for almost half an hour. Jennifer and I waited in the conference room, sipping water and not saying much. When they finally returned, Patricia looked like she had been crying. Her makeup was smudged and her eyes were red. Mrs. Montgomery has agreed to step down as HOA president, Thornton said quietly. She will submit her resignation at the next board meeting, which is scheduled for next Tuesday. In exchange, Mr. Xavier will accept the settlement as previously discussed, $10,000, written apology, return of slip 42, and no admission of political motivation in the written documents. And one more thing, I added. The HOA creates a formal complaints process with oversight by an independent third party. No more arbitrary decisions by board members. Everything goes through proper channels with documentation and appeals rights. Thornton looked at the Development Corporation representative, who nodded reluctantly. Agreed. We will work with the HOA to establish such a process. Then we have a deal, Jennifer said. She pulled out a settlement agreement she had prepared in advance, and we spent the next hour negotiating the exact language. By the time we left Thornton's office, it was after 5 o'clock, and I was exhausted, but triumphant. Saturday morning, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a young male voice said, Mr. Xavier, this is Marcus Carmichael. I am the guy who has been using slip 42. I know who you are, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Look, I just found out about all this. The HOA told me the slip was available, and I took it. I did not know they had basically stolen it from you. He sounded genuine, maybe even embarrassed. I am really sorry. I'm moving my boat to slip 37 today. No hard feelings? I was surprised. I'd expected him to be entitled and difficult, but he sounded like a decent kid who had gotten caught up in his father's influence without really understanding it. No hard feelings, I said. You did not do anything wrong. The HOA did. Yeah, well, my dad is pretty pissed at them too. He did not ask them to do this. They just assumed currying favor with him would be good politics or something. It is embarrassing, honestly. It is embarrassing for them, not you. Enjoy your boat, Marcus. Thanks, man. And hey, if you ever want to grab a beer or go fishing, let me know. I owe you one. I might take you up on that. By Monday morning, my boat was back in slip 42. I stood on the dock, looking at the familiar space, and felt a sense of satisfaction that went beyond just getting my property back. I had taken on the HOA machine and won. More importantly, I had discovered that I owned something valuable, something I could use to make sure this kind of abuse did not happen again. Tuesday evening, I attended the HOA board meeting. It was held in the yacht club's main hall, a spacious room with nautical decorations and a view of the marina. About 50 homeowners were present, which was apparently a high turnout. Patricia Montgomery sat at the head table with 4 other board members, looking like she would rather be anywhere else. When the meeting was called to order, she read from a prepared statement. I'm resigning as president of the Palmetto Harbor Homeowners Association, effective immediately. I believe it is in the best interests of the community for new leadership to take over at this time. I want to thank everyone who supported me during my tenure, and I apologize for any mistakes I made while serving in this role. There was stunned silence, then a murmur of confused conversation. One of the other board members, a man in his 60s named Gerald, stood up. Patricia's resignation comes after a serious error in judgment regarding the assignment of boat slips, he said, looking uncomfortable. The board has agreed to implement new policies to prevent similar situations in the future, including an independent oversight process for all slip assignments and a formal appeals process for homeowners who believe they have been treated unfairly. A hand went up in the audience. What error in judgment? What happened? Gerald looked at Patricia, who refused to meet his eyes. The HOA improperly seized a boat slip from a renter based on false claims of non-payment. The slip was then reassigned to another individual for reasons that were not consistent with our bylaws or the terms of our lease agreement. The situation has been resolved, but it revealed serious flaws in our procedures. More hands went up, and for the next hour, the board fielded questions about what had happened. They were careful not to mention my name or Marcus Carmichael's name, but word had already spread through the community. By the end of the meeting, everyone knew that the HOA had tried to screw over a slip renter to make room for the vice president's son, and it had backfired spectacularly. After the meeting, several homeowners came up to introduce themselves and thank me for standing up to the board. One woman, probably in her 70s, shook my hand vigorously. About time someone put those tyrants in their place, she said. They have been running this place like a dictatorship for years. Maybe now things will change. I hope so, I said. Nobody should have to deal with what I went through. Over the next few weeks, things settled into a new normal. The HOA elected a new president, a retired engineer named Thomas, who seemed genuinely interested in transparent governance. The oversight process was implemented, with complaints going to a 3-member panel that included 1 board member, 1 homeowner, and 1 independent mediator. I received my $10,000 settlement check, along with a formal letter of apology signed by the entire board. The letter acknowledged that the seizure of my slip had been improper and based on erroneous information, and it pledged to ensure such mistakes would not happen again. But I was not done yet. The more I thought about the situation, the more I realized I had an opportunity to do something meaningful with the property I owned. I called Jennifer Walsh again. I want to renegotiate the lease with Palmetto Harbor Development Corporation, I said. The current terms are too favorable to them, and they give me almost no say in how the marina is run. What do you want to change? I want a seat on the HOA board, or at least a formal advisory role. I want veto power over major decisions that affect the marina, and I want the annual lease payment increased to reflect current market values." Jennifer whistled. "That's a big ask. They are not going to like it." "They do not have to like it. They just have to accept it. The lease comes up for renewal in 70 years, but there is a renegotiation clause that allows either party to request changes if circumstances have materially changed. I would say the HOA's corruption and abuse of authority counts as a material change. Let me draft a proposal and see what they say." 2 months later, after extensive negotiations, I signed a new lease agreement with Palmetto Harbor Development Corporation. The annual payment increased from $36,000 to $75,000, reflecting current market rates for waterfront property. I was granted a permanent advisory seat on the HOA board with veto power over any decisions related to slip assignments, marina operations, or changes to the lease agreement. In exchange, I agreed not to terminate the lease and to work cooperatively with the HOA to maintain and improve the marina. The settlement also included a provision that Patricia Montgomery and any board members involved in the slip seizure could never hold HOA positions again. That part was non-negotiable for me. But the story did not end there. In July, I was contacted by a reporter from the Charleston Post and Courier. Somehow, word had leaked about what happened with the HOA and Vice President Carmichael's son. "Mr. Xavier, I am working on a story about preferential treatment and corruption in HOA management," the reporter said. "I understand you were involved in a situation where the Palmetto Harbor HOA seized your boat slip to accommodate the vice president's son. Is that correct?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to stay out of the spotlight, but another part realized this was bigger than just my personal grievance. HOA has across the country abused their power every day, and most people did not have the resources or the leverage to fight back like I did. "That is correct," I said. "What do you want to know?" The resulting article was published in early August and went viral. It detailed everything: the false claims of non-payment, the emails showing premeditation, the political motivations, and the fact that I owned the land the entire marina sat on. It painted a damning picture of HOA corruption and abuse of power. Using my case as a prime example, the reaction was intense. Local news stations picked up the story, then regional outlets, then national media. Within a week, I was fielding interview requests from CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and half a dozen other networks. I declined most of them, but I did agree to a sit-down interview with a local Charleston station. The interviewer was a sharp woman in her 30s named Rachel Park. She asked pointed questions about the HOA's behavior, the political angles, and what I thought needed to change. "HOAs are supposed to serve homeowners, not bully them," I said during the interview. "But too often they become little fiefdoms where board members abuse their power and ordinary people have no recourse. What happened to me was wrong, but I was lucky. I had resources and legal leverage that most people do not have. We need stronger oversight of HOAs, better protections for homeowners, and real consequences when board members step out of line." The interview aired that evening and was shared thousands of times online. My phone did not stop ringing for days, with calls from other HOA victims, lawyers, advocacy groups, and even a state legislator who wanted to discuss HOA reform legislation. In September, I testified before a South Carolina legislative committee that was considering new HOA regulations. I told my story, showed them the emails and documents, and made the case for stronger oversight and accountability. HOAs wield enormous power over people's homes and property, I told the committee, but that power is largely unchecked. Board members can make arbitrary decisions, falsify records, and retaliate against homeowners who speak up, all with little or no consequence. We need laws that require transparency, create independent appeals processes, and hold board members personally liable when they abuse their authority. The committee was receptive, and by November, they had drafted legislation that included many of the reforms I suggested. The bill required all HOAs in South Carolina to implement independent oversight for major decisions, established a state-level office to handle HOA complaints, and created civil penalties for board members who falsified records or engaged in corruption. The legislation faced opposition from HOA industry groups and property management companies, but it had strong support from homeowners and consumer advocates. In December, it passed both the State House and Senate with bipartisan support and was signed into law by the governor. Meanwhile, back at Palmetto Harbor, things had changed dramatically. The new HOA board, led by Thomas, was working to rebuild trust with homeowners. They held regular open meetings, published detailed financial reports, and created multiple channels for homeowners to raise concerns and complaints. I attended board meetings regularly in my advisory role, and I made sure to speak up when I saw potential problems. In October, the board proposed a fee increase for boat slips that I thought was excessive and poorly justified. I used my veto power to block it, then worked with them to develop a more reasonable fee structure that covered necessary expenses without gouging slip renters. In November, the board considered a proposal to give priority slip assignments to homeowners over non-residents like me. I explained that such a policy would violate the lease agreement and create the same kind of arbitrary decision-making that had caused problems before. After some discussion, they agreed to maintain the existing first-come, first-served system. Patricia Montgomery, meanwhile, had left the community entirely. I heard through the grapevine that she had moved to Florida after the scandal, trying to escape the notoriety. I did not feel particularly sorry for her. She had abused her power for personal and political gain, and she had paid the price for it. As for Marcus Carmichael, he turned out to be a decent guy. We did go fishing a few times, and he proved to be good company. He was embarrassed by the whole situation and worked hard to be just another member of the marina community rather than the vice president's son. My dad always told me that power attracts sycophants, Marcus said one afternoon as we were hauling in a cooler full of red drum. I never really understood what he meant until this happened. Those HOA people were not trying to help me. They were trying to use me to boost their own status. It is gross. Your dad sounds like a smart man, I said. He is, and he was not happy when he found out what they did in his name. He actually called the HOA himself and chewed them out. I had never heard him that angry. By December, life had returned to something resembling normal, but better. My boat was safely in its rightful slip, the HOA was operating more transparently than ever before, and I had a steady income stream from the increased lease payments. More importantly, I'd helped spark real change in how HOAs were regulated in South Carolina, change that would protect thousands of homeowners from the kind of abuse I had experienced. I was sitting on my boat one Saturday evening, watching the sunset over Charleston Harbor, when my phone rang. It was Jennifer Walsh. "Samuel, you are not going to believe this," she said, excitement in her voice. "I just got a call from a national homeowners advocacy group. They want to use your case as the centerpiece of a campaign to reform HOA laws across the country. They are talking about federal legislation." Federal legislation? That seems like a long shot. Maybe, but your story resonated with people. Everyone has an HOA horror story or knows someone who does. You became the face of fighting back against that abuse. They think they can build momentum for real reform if you are willing to be involved. I thought about it for a long moment, watching the lights from other boats reflecting off the dark water. A year ago, I would have said no. I would have taken my settlement, enjoyed my boat, and moved on with my life. But the past few months had shown me that individual cases of corruption were symptoms of a larger systemic problem, and solving that problem required more than just fighting your own battles. "Tell them I am interested," I said. "Let us see what we can do." Over the next several months, I became increasingly involved in HOA reform efforts. The national advocacy group, called Homeowners United, flew me to Washington, D.C. to meet with congressional staffers and testify before House and Senate committees. I told my story dozens of times, always emphasizing the same themes: transparency, accountability, and protection for ordinary homeowners against arbitrary authority. The federal legislation that emerged was not perfect, but it was a start. It required HOAs that operated on properties involving federal financing or federal lands to implement independent oversight and appeals processes. It created reporting requirements for HOA finances and gave homeowners new tools to challenge improper fees or decisions, and it established penalties for HOA board members who falsified records or engaged in corruption. The bill passed in June of 2027 and was signed into law in July. It was not everything advocates wanted, but it was a significant step forward in holding HOAs accountable. Back in Charleston, Palmetto Harbor had become something of a model for HOA reform. Other communities pointed to our independent oversight system, our transparent financial reporting, and our collaborative approach to problem solving as examples of how HOAs could operate effectively without becoming tyrannical. I continued to serve in my advisory role, attending board meetings and weighing in on major decisions. But I also made time for what I loved, being out on the water, running my business, and enjoying the life I had built in Charleston. One evening in August, I was having dinner at a waterfront restaurant when I ran into Thomas, the HOA president who had taken over after Patricia resigned. "Samuel," he said, shaking my hand warmly, "good to see you. I wanted to thank you again for everything you have done. The marina is in a much better place now than it was a year ago." "It is not just me," I said. "You and the new board deserve credit for being willing to change." "Maybe, but you forced that change. If you had not stood up to Patricia and the old board, we would still be operating the same way, making arbitrary decisions and ignoring complaints. You showed us there is a better way." We talked for a while about upcoming projects at the marina, including plans to upgrade the docks and improve storm protection. The conversation was collaborative and respectful, exactly what interactions between HOA leadership and homeowners should be. As I drove home that night, I reflected on how much had changed in just over a year. I'd gone from a guy who just wanted to enjoy his boat on weekends to someone who had taken on an entrenched power structure and won. I discovered that I owned valuable property I did not even know about, used that leverage to fight corruption, and ultimately helped spark reforms that would protect thousands of homeowners across the country. But more than that, I had learned something important about power and accountability. Organizations like HOAs derive their authority from the people they serve, but too often they forget that and start serving their own interests instead. Real change happens when ordinary people are willing to stand up, fight back, and demand better. I did not set out to be an activist or a reformer. I just wanted my boat slip back. But sometimes the right fight at the right time can change everything, not just for you, but for everyone who comes after. And that was worth more than any settlement check or lease payment could ever be. The following year brought more changes to Palmetto Harbor and the broader HOA landscape. In March of 2028, I was contacted by a documentary filmmaker who wanted to make a short film about my case and the broader issue of HOA reform. I agreed, figuring it might help spread awareness even further. The documentary, titled "Troubled Waters: Fighting HOA Corruption," premiered at a film festival in Atlanta that summer and won several awards. It was later picked up by a streaming service and reached millions of viewers. The response was overwhelming, with thousands of people sharing their own HOA horror stories in online forums and social media. By the fall of 2028, 6 more states had passed HOA reform legislation modeled on South Carolina's law. The momentum was building, and what had started as one man fighting to get his boat slip back had become a national movement. I never sought attention or recognition for what happened. I was just someone who refused to back down when confronted with injustice. But in fighting my own battle, I had helped create a path for others to follow, a template for how to challenge authority and demand accountability. Palmetto Harbor Marina continued to thrive under its new leadership. The independent oversight system worked well, resolving disputes fairly and efficiently. Slip occupancy remained high, and the community had a reputation as one of the best managed marinas in the region. I kept my boat in Slip 42, the same spot that had started all this trouble. Every time I walked down that dock, I remembered where I had been standing when Patricia Montgomery tried to tell me I did not belong there. And every time, I smiled, knowing that I had not just won my slip back. I had won something much more important, proof that ordinary people could stand up to corrupt authority and win. The lease payments from Palmetto Harbor Development Corporation continued to arrive every month, now substantially higher than before. I put most of that money into a fund to support HOA reform efforts and help homeowners who were fighting their own battles against abusive boards. It seemed like the right thing to do, using the resources I had gained to help others in similar situations. In November of 2028, I received an unexpected phone call from Vice President Douglas Carmichael himself. "Mr. Xavier, I wanted to reach out personally to thank you for how you handled the situation with my son," he said. "You could have made it a much bigger scandal, dragged Marcus through the mud, but you did not. I appreciate that." "Your son did not do anything wrong," I said. "The HOA did. He was just caught in the middle. Still, you showed class in a situation where many people would not have. And from what I understand, you have done a lot of good work on HOA reform. That is important work. It is work that needs to be done. Too many people are getting screwed by their HOAs with no recourse." I agree. In fact, I have been working with some colleagues in the Senate on a broader housing reform bill that includes additional HOA oversight provisions. I would love to get your input if you are willing. And so, my involvement in HOA reform continued, expanding in directions I never expected. I provided input on federal legislation, testified at hearings, spoke at conferences, and helped homeowners across the country navigate disputes with their HOAs. But through it all, I never forgot why I started down this path. Because someone tried to take something that belonged to me, and I refused to let them get away with it. That simple act of standing up for myself had rippled outward in ways I could never have predicted, creating change that would last long after I was gone. As I sit here now, 3 years after Patricia Montgomery tried to steal my boat slip, I can look back with satisfaction on everything that has changed. Palmetto Harbor is a better community, South Carolina has better laws, and the national conversation about HOA reform has fundamentally shifted. And me, I am just a guy with a boat who happened to own the right piece of property at the right time and who was willing to fight when fighting mattered. Sometimes that is all it takes to change the world.